I never loved you. That was all Nolan Cross said across the breakfast table, like he wasn't breaking his wife, like 11 months of marriage could be erased with one clean sentence. Outside New Orleans, rain slid down the mansion windows. Inside, Lila Hartcross stood barefoot on cold marble, watching her mother's porcelain coffee cup shatter at her feet. Maybe you've known that kind of silence. The moment someone you loved finally says the thing your heart already feared. But this story is not just about betrayal. It's about the morning a crime boss thought he was dismissing a quiet wife and instead awakened the one woman who could destroy everything he owned. Stay with this story until the end. Like the video. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from tonight. The rain did not stop after Nolan Cross walked out of the dining room. It kept tapping against the tall windows, soft and steady, like the house itself was pretending nothing had happened. Lila stood beside the long table with broken porcelain around her bare feet, and her hands still curved around the shape of the cup that was no longer there. Rose Walker came in from the servants' hallway with a broom in one hand and a dustpan in the other. She was small, gray-haired, and quiet in the way only women who had survived powerful men learned to be quiet. She had worked in that house since before Nolan was old enough to wear his father's shoes. She knew which floorboards creaked, which guards drank on duty, which doors locked from both sides. She knew where the old family ghosts lived because she had been dusting around them for 30 years. But when she saw Lila, she did not look at the broken cup first. She looked at Lila's face. That was what nearly undid her. Mrs. Cross Rose said gently. Lila swallowed, but her throat felt full of glass. Did you know Rose did not answer fast enough? The silence answered for her. Lila turned her head slowly. How long? Rose lowered her eyes. The rain made a silver blur of the garden beyond the windows. Somewhere in the house a door closed. Somewhere else a man laughed faintly. One of Nolan's guards, probably unaware that a life had just collapsed 3 rooms away from him. How long? Rose placed the broom against the wall. Before the wedding, she said. The words landed softly, which made them worse. Lila gave a small laugh that had no humor in it. Everyone knew. Not everyone. Enough. Rose came closer, careful not to step on the porcelain. Your father knew what Mr. Cross was. He knew what kind of marriage this would be. My father sold me. Rose's mouth tightened. Your father was afraid. My father was never afraid of anything. That is what men like him want their daughters to believe. Lila stared at her. For most of her life, Raymond Hart had been a portrait hanging above every room she entered. The king of the Gulf Coast. The gentleman criminal with silver hair, polished shoes, and hands that smelled faintly of tobacco and expensive soap. He kissed her forehead every night when she was a child. He taught her how to dance on the back porch while cicadas screamed in the Louisiana heat. He sent her to Tulane because her mother had wanted her educated, not ornamental, and then he died. And after he died, men came to the funeral in black suits and spoke softly over her shoulder. They shook her hand like they were measuring how much of her father was left inside her. 1 week later, Nolan Cross asked for her hand. Not with flowers, not with trembling, with Raymond's lawyer sitting beside him and armed men standing outside the room. Lila had thought it was protection. She had thought grief made the world look colder than it really was. Now she knew grief had been the only honest thing in that room. Rose bent down and picked up one large piece of the broken cup. The magnolia painted on it had split cleanly down the middle. Your father left something for you, Rose said. Lila blinked. Rose glanced toward the dining room doors. Not here. Lila wiped at her cheek and realized she was not crying. Her skin was dry. Her heart was not. That had gone somewhere deep inside her chest and curled into itself like a wounded animal. Rose stepped closer, lowering her voice. In his study, behind the fox hunt painting. Lila's breath caught. The old painting. Nolan hated that painting. He had wanted it taken down the week after the wedding. It was too dark, he said. Too old. Too much like Raymond Hart was still watching the house. Lila had refused. It was the only thing of her father's she had fought to keep. Rose continued. There is a safe behind it. Lila looked toward the hallway as if the study might answer for itself. The combination is your mother's birthday, Rose said. Not the one the world knew. The other one. Lila's hands went cold. Claire Hart had always joked about having 2 birthdays. The official one on her passport. The real one she whispered to Lila when they baked lemon cake together every October. October 3rd. Lila had been 6 when she asked why her mother needed 2 birthdays. Claire had smiled and touched flower to Lila's nose. Because before I was your mother, baby, I had to survive being someone else. Lila had not understood. Children rarely understand the truth when it first touches them. They only remember the shape of it later. Rose picked up the broom again and began sweeping, but her hands trembled. You need to go now, she said. Mr. Cross has a meeting in the city. He will be gone for hours if Vincent Hale is there. The guards change at noon. The east gate is blind for 12 minutes. Lila stared at her. You know that I know everything that keeps women alive in this house. The words moved through Lila like a match catching paper. Alive, not happy, not loved. Alive. She looked down at her left hand. The wedding ring glittered under the chandelier. 4 carats, white diamond, platinum band. Nolan had chosen it himself. When he slid it onto her finger at the altar, his touch had been cool and steady. She had mistaken steadiness for strength. She had mistaken possession for protection. The priest had said, "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Nolan had not looked at her when he said, "I do." Now she knew why. Lila stepped away from the table. A shard of porcelain cut the bottom of her foot. She did not make a sound. Rose saw the blood and started forward, but Lila lifted one hand. No. She walked out of the dining room, leaving a faint red mark on the marble behind her. The hallway to Raymond Hart's study felt longer than it had ever felt before. Everything in the Cross estate was designed to make people feel small. High ceilings, oil portraits, marble floors, windows tall enough to swallow whole trees. Nolan had filled the rooms with expensive furniture and silence. Even the flowers were changed before they had time to wilt. Lila passed 2 guards near the staircase. They straightened when they saw her. "Ma'am," one of them said. She nodded without stopping. Her face felt calm. That frightened her more than tears would have. She had imagined once that if her marriage truly broke, she would fall apart. She would scream. She would throw things. She would beg Nolan to take the words back. Instead, her body seemed to understand something her heart was only beginning to learn. Begging was for women who still believed the door might open. Lila had just found the wall. Raymond's study sat at the west side of the mansion facing the Oaks. Nolan rarely used it. He had his own office with glass walls, security screens, and a locked bourbon cabinet. Raymond's study was darker, older, full of leather and dust and the faint smell of pipe tobacco that should have disappeared years ago but never had. Lila shut the door behind her. For a moment she stood still. The room felt like her father. Not the father in newspapers. Not the man men called Mr. Hart with fear hidden under respect. Her father. The one who lifted her onto his shoulders during Mardi Gras parades. The one who held her mother's hand at church. The one who cried at Claire's funeral with his face turned toward the rain so no one would see. The fox hunt painting hung above the fireplace. A pack of hounds chased a red fox through a winter field. Men in dark coats followed on horses' faces bright with sport eyes fixed on the animal running for its life. Lila had always hated it. Now she understood why. She crossed the room and gripped the frame with both hands. It was heavier than she expected. For a moment it resisted her. Then it shifted, scraping against the wall. Behind it was a square steel safe. Lila's pulse beat in her ears. She touched the dial. October 3rd, 1979. The first turn clicked too loudly. She stopped and listened. Nothing. The second number. The third. The safe did not open. Her heart slammed once. "No," she whispered. She tried again, slower. Still nothing. Lila closed her eyes. Her mother's voice came back to her, soft and amused. "Before I was your mother, baby, I had to survive being someone else. Someone else. Not Claire Hart, Claire Mason." The name on the old documents in the cedar chest, the ones Lila found when she was 13 and her mother laughed too quickly before taking them away. Lila remembered the second birthday now. June 21st. Her mother had called it the day I learned to run. Lila turned the dial. 6/21, 1978. The safe clicked. The door opened. Lila stood there for a long second, staring into a darkness that had been waiting for her. Inside was a thick manila envelope yellowed at the edges, a leather ledger wrapped in brown paper, a stack of photographs bound with a rubber band, a small black velvet pouch, and a letter with her name written across the front in Raymond Hart's strong, slanted handwriting. Lila. Not Mrs. Cross, not my daughter, just Lila. Her fingers shook as she opened the letter. My beautiful girl. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and the man I gave you to has finally shown you the shape of your cage. Lila gripped the paper so hard it wrinkled. Forgive me if you can. Hate me if you must. I knew Nolan Cross would never love you the way you deserved. I knew because men like Nolan are built in rooms where love is treated like a weakness, and mercy is beaten out before boyhood ends. I did not give you to him for love. I gave you to him because every wolf in the South was waiting for my grave to cool before coming for you. The words blurred. She blinked until they sharpened again. Nolan could keep you alive. That was the bargain. But I never trusted any man completely, not even the one who became your husband. Inside this safe is the truth behind the empire I built. The debts owed, the routes used, the judges bought the saints who were sinners, and the sinners who owned saints. It is enough to free you. It is enough to bury men who believe they are untouchable. Do not use it for revenge, unless revenge is the only road left. Use it to walk away. Use it to become the woman your mother saw every time she looked at you. I loved you. I failed you. Both things are true. Papa. Lila read the letter once, then again. There was love in it. There was cowardice, too. The two sat side by side, ugly and intimate, like old relatives forced into the same pew at a funeral. She lowered herself into her father's leather chair. For a few seconds, she let herself be a daughter. Just a daughter. Then she reached for the ledger. The leather cover was worn smooth at the corners. Raymond had carried books like this when she was a child. She used to think they held grocery notes, phone numbers, maybe prayers. Men like her father always seemed to be writing things down after church. She opened it. The first pages were filled with names, dates, amounts, initials, abbreviations she did not understand. Then photographs slipped from the back. A judge from Baton Rouge standing on a dock with Raymond. A police captain smiling beside Nolan's father, Arthur Cross. A state senator leaving a hotel with a woman who was not his wife. A preacher Lila recognized from television standing beside three men she had seen at her wedding. The ledger was not a diary. It was a map of rot. Her eyes moved down one page, catching familiar names and strange codes. Then she stopped. Arthur Cross. Payment confirmed. $3.2 million. Baton Rouge. November 2018. The room seemed to tilt. Arthur Cross had died in his sleep. That was what everyone said. His heart had failed. Nolan had been 29 when he inherited the Cross Syndicate, his face carved into stone at the funeral. Lila had seen pictures. The whole city had watched a son become a king beside an open grave. But Arthur Cross had not died. He had been purchased, and Raymond Hart had paid. Lila closed the ledger with both hands. The sound was small but final. If Nolan saw this, everything would change. He would know her father had murdered his father. He would know the marriage was not only loveless, it was built over a grave. Lila stood too quickly and knocked the chair back. The room did not feel like her father anymore. It felt like a trap. She gathered the ledger, the envelope, the photographs, and the velvet pouch. Inside the pouch was a silver cross on a thin chain. Her mother's. Lila recognized it by the tiny dent near the bottom from when Claire dropped it on the kitchen tile while making Sunday breakfast. Lila pressed the cross to her mouth. For the first time that morning, tears came. Not many, just enough to remind her she was still alive. Then she wiped them away with the back of her hand. The clock on the mantel read 11:46. The east gate would go blind at noon. She had 14 minutes. Lila put everything back into the envelope except the cross, which she clasped around her neck. It rested cold against her skin. She replaced the painting as carefully as she could, though one corner hung slightly crooked. Let Nolan notice. Let him wonder. She opened the study door and stepped into the hallway. The house continued breathing around her. Men talking low. A vacuum running somewhere upstairs. Rain against glass. The ordinary music of a prison before the prisoner runs. Lila went to her bedroom. The room looked obscene to her now. Silk curtains, white roses, a bed big enough for two people who had never truly shared it. Nolan's gifts lined the vanity like apologies that had never learned to speak. A diamond bracelet, a bottle of perfume from Paris, a necklace she wore to dinners where men discussed blood over red wine and called it business. She pulled a leather overnight bag from the closet. Her hands moved quickly. Jeans, a sweater, a plain shirt, underwear, passport, a small roll of cash hidden inside a tampon box. She had skimmed it from the household account for months without knowing why. Maybe some part of her had been packing long before her hands did. She changed out of the blue dress and into dark pants, a gray sweater, and low boots. She wrapped the envelope in a cardigan and placed it at the bottom of the bag. Then she stopped at the nightstand. Her ring caught the light. Lila twisted it once. It resisted. Her finger had grown used to the weight. She pulled harder. The diamond slid free. Her hand looked naked, younger somehow, like it belonged to the girl she had been before men started deciding what she was worth. She placed the ring on Nolan's side of the nightstand. For a moment, she almost left without a note. Then she opened the drawer and took out a sheet of cream stationery. Across the top in gold script it read, Lila Hart Cross. She stared at the name. It looked like a sentence. She picked up a pen and wrote 3 words. You were right. She folded nothing, hid nothing, explained nothing. The ring sat beside the note like a period at the end of a life. A soft knock sounded. Lila turned sharply. Rose entered without waiting. She carried a black raincoat and a scarf. Put these on. Lila took them. Rose, if he finds out you helped me. He will. Lila's throat tightened. Then come with me. Rose smiled, but it was a tired thing. Baby, I have been running in place inside this house since before you were born. My road ends here for now. No. Rose stepped forward and gripped Lila's face in both hands, sudden and fierce. Listen to me. Do not let panic make you polite. Do not use your cards. Do not call anyone from your old life. If a man says Nolan sent him to help run the other way, if someone calls you Mrs. Cross, they are not safe. You are Lila Hart until you choose another name. Lila nodded, tears pressing behind her eyes again. Rose reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a prepaid phone. It has one number in it. Mine. Use it once if you must. Then break it. Lila took the phone. Rose's hands lingered over hers. Your mother was braver than all of them, Rose whispered. Do you hear me? All of them. Lila could not speak. She threw her arms around Rose. The older woman held her tightly, rocking once, just once, the way Claire used to do when thunder scared Lila as a child. Then Rose pulled away first. Go. The servants' corridor smelled of lemon polish, old wood, and coffee. It ran behind the grand rooms, narrow and dim, the hidden artery of the mansion. Lila followed Rose past the laundry room, past the kitchen, past a young maid who looked up once and then quickly looked away. At the back door, Rose stopped. Beyond it, the garden stretched wet and green beneath the gray sky. The east gate stood past the hedges, half hidden by cypress trees. Lila could see no guard. Her pulse became a drum. Rose opened the door. Cold rain kissed Lila's face. Walk, Rose said. Do not run unless someone calls your name. Lila stepped outside. The gravel path crunched beneath her boots. The bag felt heavier with every step. Not because of the clothes, because of the ledger, because of her father's letter, because of Arthur Cross's name written in dark ink, because a dead woman's cross lay against her heart. Halfway across the garden, she heard a voice behind her. Ma'am Lila's body turned to ice. One of the gardeners stood near the hedges with pruning shears in his hand. He was young, no older than 20. You forgot your umbrella, he called. For one terrible second, Lila could not move. Then she lifted one hand in a small wave. I'm just going to the greenhouse. The lie came out smooth. Too smooth. The gardener nodded and went back to the hedges. Lila kept walking. 10 yards, 5. The east gate was iron-painted black, wet with rain. She pushed it open slowly, praying it would not scream on its hinges. It gave with a soft groan. Outside was a narrow service road lined with live oaks. A yellow cab waited beneath the trees. Its windshield wipers moved back and forth, steady as a heartbeat. Lila stood with one hand on the gate. For 11 months, the Cross estate had been her whole world. Her bedroom, her dining room, her carefully arranged prison. Inside those walls, she had been lonely, humiliated, watched, managed, protected, displayed. But she had also been fed, sheltered, named. Outside the gate was rain and no plan. Outside the gate was every enemy her father had made. Outside the gate was Nolan's wrath. Her hand tightened around the iron. For 1 weak second she wanted to go back upstairs, put the ring on, lie down in the bed, and pretend the morning had not happened. Then Nolan's voice returned clean and cold. I never loved you. Lila stepped through the gate. The cab driver did not turn when she opened the back door. He only looked at her once in the rearview mirror. Older man. Brown skin weathered by sun. Gray beard. Tired eyes that had seen too many people leave places they were not supposed to leave. Where to, he asked. Lila slid into the back seat and closed the door. The Cross estate stood behind her, white and perfect beyond the trees. She looked at it one last time. I don't know yet, she said. The driver studied her in the mirror. Then he put the car in drive. The cab pulled away from the curb slow enough not to draw attention, fast enough that the gate began to shrink behind the rain. Lila pressed one hand over the envelope hidden in her bag and the other over her mother's cross. The mansion disappeared behind a bend in the road. Only then did she breathe. The first breath did not feel like freedom. It felt sharp. It felt stolen. Lila sat in the back of the cab with her wet coat wrapped tight around her body, the envelope hidden beneath her bag, and the city slipping past the windows in streaks of gray and green. New Orleans looked ordinary outside the glass. Corner stores opening their doors, a woman carrying groceries under one arm, A man in a rain poncho pushing a stroller across a cracked sidewalk. Life kept moving as if Lila had not just walked out of a mansion with a dead man's secrets pressed against her ribs. The driver kept his eyes on the road for the first 10 minutes. He did not ask questions. That made Lila trust him a little and fear him more. When they reached the service road that fed into the highway, he finally looked at her in the rearview mirror. "You got somewhere in mind." His voice was low, rough from cigarettes or age, or both. Lila opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She had planned the leaving. She had counted the guards. She had memorized the East Gate shift change. She had packed the cash, the passport, the ledger, the letter, the cross. But she had not imagined a destination. That seemed stupid now. Childish. Like jumping from a burning house and being surprised by the ground. "North," she said. The driver nodded once. "North is a big place, away from the city." He glanced at her hands. They were clenched so tightly around the strap of her bag that the leather had dented her skin. "You running from a husband?" Lila looked out the window. Rain crawled down the glass like fingers. The driver gave a small sound, not quite a laugh. "That is an answer." She turned back to him. "What is your name?" "Sam Carter." "Mr. Carter, I can pay you in cash, more than the meter. I just need you to keep driving. Sam is fine." Sam. His eyes met hers in the mirror again. They were tired eyes, but not empty. There was grief in them, packed down so long it had become part of his face. "You got a phone on you?" he asked. Lila touched her coat pocket. Her phone was there. Nolan had bought it for her. Nolan paid the bill. Nolan's men could find it. Rose's warning moved through her like a hand on her shoulder. "Do not use your phone." Lila rolled down the window. Cold rain rushed into the cab. She pulled the phone from her pocket and dropped it into the road. It hit the asphalt, bounced once, and vanished beneath the spray of a passing truck. Sam watched in the mirror. "That bad," he said. "Worse." He drove another mile in silence, then reached beneath his seat and pulled out an old flip phone with scratches across the screen. He handed it back without turning around. "Prepaid. No name on it. I keep it in case my cab breaks down where the world forgets to send help." Lila stared at the phone in her palm. "Why are you giving me this?" Sam's jaw worked once. "My sister married a man who smiled in church and broke furniture at home. One night, she ran. No one opened a door. No one made a call. 3 days later, they found her outside Shreveport in a ditch full of rainwater." Lila's throat closed. Sam kept driving. Her name was Jenny. She was 26. "So, today, I help." Lila looked down at the phone until the little screen blurred. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Sam said. "Tell me how scared I need to be." Lila thought of Nolan's face across the breakfast table, thought of the ledger, thought of Arthur Cross's name written in her father's hand. "Very." Sam exhaled through his nose. "All right." Across the city, Nolan Cross stood in his wife's bedroom and knew before anyone told him. He knew from the open closet. He knew from the empty space where her travel bag should have been. He knew from the silence. The room still smelled faintly of Jasmine Lila's perfume, but the scent was already thinning, already leaving him. Her blue dress lay over the chair near the window. A damp footprint marked the floor near the bed. The vanity was neat too, neat the way people leave things when they are not coming back to disturb them. Then he saw the ring. 4 carats of diamond sat on his side of the nightstand beside a sheet of cream stationery. Nolan did not touch it at first. He only looked. The note had 3 words. "You were right." For the first time since he was 12 years old, Nolan felt something cold move under his ribs that had nothing to do with anger. "Mason," he called. His second in command appeared almost instantly in the doorway. tall, dark-haired, careful. Mason Reed had survived 9 years under Nolan by knowing when to speak and when to become furniture. "Yes, boss. Check Raymond Hart's study." Mason's eyes flicked once to the ring. Nolan's voice dropped. "Now." Mason left. Nolan picked up the note. "You were right." He read it once, twice, a third time. His hand closed around the paper until it bent. He had wanted her to understand what the marriage was. He had wanted her useful on Friday night when Vincent Hale came to dinner. He had wanted clean lines, no confusion, no softness getting between him and the deal he had spent 2 years building. Instead, she had taken him at his word. The door opened behind him. Mason stood there with less color in his face than before. "The safe is open." Nolan turned slowly. "What safe?" "Behind the fox hunt painting." Nolan closed his eyes. "Raymond Hart, you old bastard. Empty?" he asked. "Completely." Nolan looked back at the ring. "She has the ledger." Mason said nothing. That was answer enough. Nolan slipped the ring into his pocket. It was cold against his palm. "Find her." "Yes, boss. Every road out, every station, every airport, every driver we pay. Start with the east gate and work outward." Mason nodded. "And Mason?" "Yes. No one touches her." Mason looked up. Nolan's eyes were black and steady. "If any man puts a hand on my wife, he answers to me before God ever gets a turn." Mason swallowed. Alive and unharmed. Alive, unharmed, breathing. Terrified is acceptable. Bruised is not. Mason left without another word. Nolan stood alone in the bedroom. For a moment he heard the echo of his own voice from breakfast. "I never loved you." He had said it cleanly, precisely, like a man cutting a wire. Now the house was burning anyway. By late afternoon, Sam had taken Lila through back roads and rain-gray towns where churches sat beside pawn shops and gas stations sold boiled peanuts under buzzing lights. He stopped once for fuel and made her stay low in the back seat while he paid cash. He brought her coffee in a paper cup and a package of crackers she could not swallow. "You need to eat," he said. "I can't. Your fear does not care if your body quits. Eat anyway." She took one cracker and chewed until it turned to paste. At a cheap motel outside Macomb, Mississippi, Sam pulled around the back instead of stopping at the office entrance. The sign out front flickered blue and red in the rain. Half the letters were dead. The parking lot held 2 pickup trucks, a broken ice machine, and a vending machine glowing like a small, lonely altar. "You can stay here a few hours," Sam said. "Not longer." Lila looked at him. "How much do I owe you?" He shook his head. "Sam," he sighed. "Pay the room. Keep the rest. I do not want charity, and I did not want my sister dead. The world gives us things we did not ask for. She gave him $500 anyway, and another 100 for gas. He took it because refusing would have made her feel smaller." At the front desk, a woman with pink curlers and a cigarette voice slid a registration card across the counter. Name Lila's hand paused. Her old name felt dangerous. Her married name felt filthy. "Claire Mason," she said. Her mother's hidden name sat on her tongue like a prayer. The woman did not look up. "Room 14. Ice machine's broke. Don't flush anything weird." Lila nodded and took the key. Room 14 smelled of bleach old carpet and cigarettes buried under air freshener. The bedspread had brown flowers on it. The curtains were thick enough to hide behind and thin enough to make her feel exposed. She locked the door, latched the chain, then dragged the dresser in front of it with both hands until her arms shook. For several minutes she stood in the middle of the room and listened. No footsteps, no voices, No engines slowing outside. Only rain on the roof and the low hum of the air conditioner. She sat on the bed and opened the envelope. The ledger waited. Lila did not want to touch it again. The thing felt alive now, like a snake sleeping in leather. But she had not run from Nolan Cross to remain ignorant in a motel room. She opened it. Page after page. Names, payments, initials, routes through ports and warehouses, judges marked with dollar amounts, police chiefs connected to dates, a congressman with a shell charity, a church account tied to cartel money. Her father had not merely survived crime. He had organized it with the neat handwriting of a man balancing a household budget. Then she saw her mother's name, Claire Hart. Payment arranged, $1.8 million. Galveston, July 2004. Lila stopped breathing. The room narrowed. Her mother had died in August of that year. Cancer. That was the story. A rare, fast thing. Raymond had told her that life could be cruel, and bodies could betray the people who lived inside them. Lila had been 9 years old. She remembered the hospital smell. Remembered her mother's hand, thin and warm around hers. Remembered Raymond crying beside the bed. Payment arranged. Lila stood so fast the ledger slid to the floor. She made it to the bathroom before her knees gave out. The tile was cold. The light above the mirror flickered. She gripped the edge of the sink and stared at herself. Her mother had not died. Her mother had been removed. By the man who kissed Lila's forehead at night. By the man who taught her to dance. By the man who placed her hand into Nolan Cross's and called it protection. A sound came out of Lila then. Low, broken, animal. She pressed her fist against her mouth to keep it inside. For a while she let grief have her. Not loudly, not prettily. She slid down the wall and sat on the bathroom floor with her knees to her chest, rocking once, twice the silver cross cold against her skin. Then something changed. The crying stopped all at once. Not because she was healed, because there was no room left. Her sorrow had hit something harder inside her and turned into heat. Lila wiped her face with toilet paper from the cheap motel roll. She stood. She looked in the mirror again. Her hair was damp. Her eyes were red. Her mouth was pale. She did not look like Nolan Cross's wife. She did not look like Raymond Hart's daughter. She looked like a woman standing at the edge of her own life with blood under the floorboards behind her and fire ahead. "No more," she whispered. The burner phone buzzed on the bed. Lila froze. No one had that number except Rose. She picked it up with shaking fingers. "Hello, it's Sam." She sagged against the nightstand. "You scared me." "Good. Stay scared." A black Escalade just rolled by the motel twice. Slow. Too slow. Lila turned toward the window. The curtain was closed. "How do you know I doubled back after I left you?" "Old habit." "Did they see you?" "Maybe. Maybe not. But if they are Nolan's people, they are faster than you thought." Her hand tightened around the phone. "I cannot stay here," she said. "No." "Where am I supposed to go?" "My cousin Hank has a farm 40 miles north of here. Pigs, mud, bad coffee, no questions. He hates cops, bankers, and almost everyone else. That makes him useful." Lila closed her eyes. This could be a trap. Sam could have sold her. Nolan could already be waiting on some dirt road with that calm face and those dead eyes. But the Escalade outside was not imaginary. Neither was the ledger. Neither was her mother's name on that page. What time she asked. Midnight, back lot. I flashed the headlights twice. If you see anything else, you run. Sam, yeah. If you are lying to me. I know, he said softly. You cannot afford one more man who lies. The line went dead. Lila packed in 3 minutes. Then she sat on the floor behind the bed with the lamp off and the ledger against her chest. The room darkened slowly. Rain became night. Every car on the highway sounded like Nolan. Every footstep outside sounded like a man with a gun. Once someone laughed near the vending machine and Lila nearly stopped breathing. At 11:58, she moved the dresser. At midnight, 2 headlights flashed through the curtain. Twice. Lila opened the door and ran. Sam's cab waited with the engine low and the lights off. His face looked older than it had that afternoon. "Get in." She did. Before the door was fully closed, he was moving. At the edge of the lot near the highway entrance, a black Escalade sat under a dead streetlight. Lila turned cold. Sam did not take the highway. He drove behind the motel, past the dumpsters, through a gap in a rusted fence, and onto a dirt road that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The cab bounced hard. Lila grabbed the seat. "Do they know this road?" she asked. "No. How do you know?" "Because I got lost on it drunk in 1998 and nearly married a cypress tree." Despite everything, Lila laughed. It came out small and cracked, but real. Sam smiled faintly without looking back. "There she is," he said, "still alive." They drove through darkness for almost an hour. Trees pressed close on both sides. The rain thinned to mist. Lila watched the road behind them until her eyes hurt, expecting headlights to bloom out of the dark. None came. Hank Carter's farm looked like something the world had forgotten, and the weather had been trying to finish off for years. The house leaned slightly to the left. The porch sagged. A single bulb burned above the door. Beyond the fence, pigs moved like dark shapes in the mud. A man stood under the porch light with a shotgun held loose at his side. He was short, broad-bald, and built like a barrel. His beard grew in 3 directions. His face looked carved by bad decisions and worse winters. Hank Sam called. "Sam." The men embraced with one hard slap on the back. Then Hank looked at Lila. He studied her borrowed coat, her wet hair, the bag in her hand, the fear she was trying not to show. "You got a name I do not need to remember?" he asked. Lila understood at once. "Claire." Hank nodded. "All right, Claire. You can sleep upstairs. You can eat what is on the stove. You can use the bathroom if you do not mind the water being mean." "Thank you. I got one rule." Lila waited. "Do not tell me who you are. Do not tell me who wants you. If men come to my door, I want to look them in the eye and say I do not know a damn thing, because I prefer my lies simple and my conscience clean." "I understand." "Good." Sam touched Lila's shoulder before she went inside. "My wife is going to skin me when I get home. I am sorry." He shook his head. "She would skin me worse if I had done nothing." Lila's eyes filled again. Sam looked uncomfortable with gratitude, so he stepped back. "Do not die, Claire." Then he got in his cab and drove away, his tail lights fading into the wet dark. Inside, Hank's house smelled of wood smoke, coffee, and pigs. There was a pot of beans on the stove and cornbread wrapped in a towel. Hank set a plate in front of her without asking if she was hungry. "You eat in this house," he said. "Panic burns calories." Lila ate because her body finally remembered it was a body. Hank did not ask questions. He told her the pigs' names instead. One was Dolly, one was President Jackson, one was Mary Beth, because according to Hank, she had judgmental eyes. For 10 minutes, Lila listened to a strange man insult livestock with deep affection, and somehow the sound of it kept her from breaking apart. When she finished, Hank pointed to the stairs. "Room at the top. Lockworks. Window sticks. If you hear someone in the kitchen at 4, that is me. If you hear someone who is not me, scream once and get on the floor." Lila looked at the shotgun near the door. Hank followed her eyes. "It is ugly," he said, "but it has opinions." She almost smiled. Upstairs, the bedroom was small. A narrow bed, a wooden chair, a quilt faded soft from years of washing. One window looked out over the fields where mist sat low above the ground like smoke. Lila placed the ledger on the bed. She took off her coat. Her mother's cross caught the dim light. She opened the ledger again. This time she did not flinch. She read until the sky beyond the window turned from black to gray. Names became patterns. Payments became roads. Roads became power. Her father had drawn lines through the South with money and blood, and men like Nolan Cross had built kingdoms on top of them without ever seeing the whole map. Near dawn, Lila found Nolan's name, not as a buyer, not as a killer, twice beside entries marked withheld, once beside a note in Raymond's hand. Crossboy does not know. Lila stared at the words. Nolan was a monster. He had humiliated her, used her, locked her inside a marriage and called it protection. He had broken her with one sentence over breakfast. But he had not killed her mother. He had not paid for his own father's death. He had been raised inside a lie, too. Lila hated that it mattered. She closed the ledger and stood at the window. The farm was waking. Somewhere downstairs, Hank moved through the kitchen. Pigs grunted in the yard. Dawn spread pale over the fields. Lila pressed her palm against the cold glass. For the first time since she stepped through the east gate, she was not only running away from Nolan Cross, she was carrying the truth toward daylight. By sunrise, the farm had become a map of sounds. Pigs shifting in mud. Hank moving around downstairs with the heavy patience of a man who had fed animals before feeding himself for most of his life. Wind rubbing tree limbs against the siding. The old house seemed to groan awake around Lila while she stood at the window with Raymond Hart's ledger open on the chair behind her. She had not slept. Sleep felt like a luxury for people who had not found their mother's murder written in their father's handwriting. Downstairs, a kettle screamed. Lila closed the ledger and pressed both hands to her face. Her eyes burned. Her body ached from the motel floor, the cab ride, the cold room, the fear that had lived in her muscles since breakfast. But under the exhaustion was something cleaner now, something dangerous. Direction. A knock sounded at the door. Not hard, not soft. 2 knuckles against old wood. Claire Hank called from the hallway. "Coffee." Lila opened the door. Hank stood there in a flannel shirt with a chipped mug in one hand and a shotgun tucked under his other arm like it was a newspaper. "You always carry that?" she asked. "Only when Rich Trouble sleeps upstairs." She took the mug. The coffee smelled burned and strong enough to take paint off a wall. Sam called Hank said. Lila's fingers tightened around the cup. "Is he alive?" "For now." 2 men came to his house at 3 a.m. Black suits, expensive shoes, bad manners. Her stomach turned. His wife. Told them Sam was with his brother in Jackson and that if they knocked on her door again before sunrise, she would introduce them to her cast iron skillet. Despite everything, Lila almost smiled. Hank shifted his weight. They asked about a woman in a cream coat. Lila looked down at the black raincoat Rose had given her folded over the chair. "Hank, I am sorry. Do not waste apologies on things already done. They will come here. Maybe, and if they do." He shrugged. "I tell them I do not know a woman in a cream coat. That will not stop them." Hank looked at her then, and the sleepy humor left his face. "No," he said. It might not. For a moment the house felt very small. Then Hank nodded toward the stairs. "Come eat. Panic is easier on a full stomach." In New Orleans, Nolan Cross had not moved from Lila's closet floor until the morning light found him there. Her letters lay around him like evidence. He had read every one. The hopeful ones hurt. The angry ones hurt worse. The quiet ones nearly killed him. "Nolan, you came home at 2 a.m. and stood in the hallway outside my room for almost a minute. I know because I was awake. I thought you might knock. You did not. Nolan, I wore the green dress tonight because you once said green looked good on me. You did not notice. Nolan, I think there is a version of you that wants to be kind. I wish you would let him live. The last letter had only 3 lines. I am tired of waiting for a man who only loves me when I am useful. I do not know how to leave yet. I am trying to learn. Nolan sat with that final page in his hand until the paper softened from the heat of his palm. Mason found him there at 7:30. He said nothing at first. He knew better than to step into a wounded animal's den without letting it smell him. "Boss." Nolan looked up. Mason's face changed when he saw him. Not much. Mason was too trained for that. But enough. "Report," Nolan said. Mason kept his eyes steady. "We have her leaving through the east gate at 11:58. Black coat, scarf, bag over one shoulder. She got into a cab on Moreau Lane. Driver Samuel Carter, 62, licensed taxi driver. Lives in the 9th Ward with his wife. No known syndicate ties, no Hale ties, no Hart family ties." Nolan stood, his knees stiffened from hours on the floor. "No one has no ties. Sometimes a cab driver is a cab driver." Nolan's eyes cut to him. Mason lowered his voice. "Sometimes. What else?" Her phone went dead north of the city. We found it cracked on the shoulder near Hammond. She dumped it. A flicker of something crossed Nolan's face. It might have been anger. It might have been pride. She knew he said, "Yes." She watched the gate. She knew the phone. She knew the routes. Mason did not answer. Nolan folded the last letter carefully and placed it back in the wooden box. "Say it." Mason's jaw tightened. Nolan looked at him. "Say whatever you are trying not to say." Mason took a slow breath. She was smarter than we treated her. The room became very quiet. Nolan placed the lid on the box. "Yes," he said. She was. That was worse than shouting. Mason looked away. Nolan lifted Lila's ring from the floor beside him and slipped it into his coat pocket. "Where is Carter?" "Not home. His wife says Jackson. She lied. Probably. Find him. We have men looking." Nolan looked toward Lila's bed, the empty side, the untouched pillow, the shape of a life he had been too proud to enter. "No," he said. Mason blinked. "Boss, stand them down." Mason stared at him. From Carter. From everyone. The silence that followed had a pulse. "Boss, she has the ledger." "I know. If Raymond Hart kept what we think he kept, that book can take down half the state." "I know. If she gives it to Hale, if she gives it to the feds, if she gives it to the press, we are finished." Nolan turned fully toward him. "Then maybe we should have built something that could survive the truth." Mason looked at him like he did not recognize the man standing in front of him. Nolan understood. He barely recognized himself. "Call them off," he said. "Every driver, every road crew, every man watching airports and stations. No one grabs her, no one scares her, no one follows her close enough to make her run blind." Mason's voice lowered. "And what are you going to do?" Nolan picked up the wooden box of letters. "I am going to find my wife. With men, no. With guns, no." Mason studied him. Nolan's mouth twisted. "I know. It feels unnatural. It feels suicidal. Good. Maybe sincerity should." Mason did not smile. "Nolan." The use of his first name struck the room like a dropped glass. Mason only used it when death was already standing nearby. If you go alone and Hale hears about it, he will take the city before sunset. Then do your job and keep him busy. And if Lila Hart decides to burn us? Nolan looked down at the ring in his palm. "Then we burn." At Hank's kitchen table, Lila forced down eggs she could not taste while Hank made calls from an old wall phone with a cord stretched nearly to the stove. He spoke in pieces. Need a ride north. No names. Cold truck is fine. No, not drugs. Yes, I know what you said last time. He hung up and poured more coffee. You are riding with Eddie Boone. Lila looked up. Who is Eddie Boone? A man who owes me money and drives shrimp to Memphis twice a week. Shrimp? Yes. In a truck. That is how shrimp travels generally. She rubbed her forehead. Hank, I need to get somewhere safe enough to think. Not just farther away. Thinking is what gets most people killed. Moving keeps you breathing. She looked at the ledger wrapped in cloth beside her chair. I have to get this to someone clean. Hank gave her a dry look. Clean people are rare. Clean people with power are usually imaginary. There has to be someone. There is someone for everyone if they live long enough to find them. He pushed a small piece of paper across the table. On it was an address in Memphis and a time. Eddie will take you to the city. From there you call whoever you trust. I do not trust anyone. Then call the person you distrust least. Lila stared at the paper. A number she had memorized when she was 9 years old stirred in the back of her mind. Silas Mercer, her father's enemy, her mother's friend. At Claire's funeral, he had knelt in front of Lila in a gray suit and taken her small hand between both of his. If you ever need me, child, you call. Raymond had pulled her away before she could answer. Lila had never called. At 10 in the morning, Eddie Boone arrived in a refrigerated seafood truck that smelled of salt diesel and old ice. He was thin, middle-aged, and wearing mirrored sunglasses, though the sky was cloudy. He looked at Hank, then at Lila, then at the bag in her hand. No, Eddie said. Hank crossed his arms. Yes. No women in the truck. She is not a woman in the truck. She is cargo with problems. I said no last time after your cousin made me haul that fighting rooster. The rooster lived. It bit me. It was under stress. Eddie pointed at Lila. Is she under stress? Hank looked at her. Lila looked back. Yes, Hank said. But she probably will not bite. Eddie muttered something about family debts and opened the back of the truck. Cold air rolled out. Inside were stacked white pallets marked with seafood company labels, bags of ice, boxes of shrimp. The smell hit Lila hard, briny, and sharp. Eddie pointed to a narrow space behind the last pallet. You fit there. You stay there. 4 hours if roads are kind. More if they are not. If anybody opens the back, you become part of the wall. No coughing, no praying loud, no crying. Cops hate crying, I understand. If you get sick, aim away from the shrimp. Hank handed her a blanket. It smells bad, he said. So does everything else today. She took it. At the truck door, Hank paused. You got people waiting? Lila thought of Silas Mercer's number. Maybe. Maybe is better than no. She reached for his hand. Hank looked offended by the emotion, but let her squeeze his fingers. Thank you. He pulled his hand back. Do not make it weird. Lila climbed into the cold. Eddie shut the door. Darkness swallowed her whole. The truck started with a shudder. Lila wedged herself behind the pallets and pulled the blanket around her shoulders. The cold entered fast. It found her wrists, her ankles, the damp roots of her hair. She held the ledger under her coat against her stomach like body heat might keep the truth alive. The truck moved. Wood creaked. Ice shifted. Somewhere above her, the refrigeration unit hummed and rattled. Lila closed her eyes. Her mother's cross pressed against her throat. Hold, she whispered. It was the word Claire used during thunderstorms when Lila was little and afraid. Hold my hand. Hold your breath. Hold the line. Hold. On the highway north, Nolan drove his father's old gray sedan with Lila's letters on the passenger seat. The car smelled like cracked leather and old smoke. Arthur Cross had driven it for 20 years, long after he could afford better. Nolan used to sit in the back as a boy, silent and stiff, while his father conducted business through a half-open window. "Never let them see hunger," Arthur would say. "Never let them see fear. Never love anything that can be used as a knife." Nolan gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles paled. "I listened to you," he said to the empty car. "God help me." I listened. The sedan did not answer. He stopped at gas stations, diners, truck stops. He showed Lila's photo to cashiers, waitresses, mechanics, anyone who might have seen a woman with sad eyes and a borrowed coat. Most shook their heads. Some looked at him with suspicion. One old woman behind a counter outside Jackson took the photo and stared at it for a long time. "She running from you, Nolan, almost lied." Instead, he said, "Yes." The woman handed the photo back. "What did you do?" He looked down at Lila's face in the picture. "I told her I never loved her." The old woman's mouth hardened. "Was it true? No. Then you are not just cruel. You are stupid." Nolan nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Did you hit her? No. Did you cheat? No." Then why Nolan opened his mouth? The answer he had lived with for years came up first. Because love is weakness. Because softness gets men killed. Because my father made sure I knew better. But those were not answers. They were old chains with his father's name on them. "I was afraid," Nolan said. "I thought if I made her hate me first, losing her would hurt less." The old woman looked at him as if he were something both pitiful and dangerous. "And did it?" Nolan laughed once. No humor, no air, no. She leaned on the counter. "Then when you find her, if she lets you speak, do not waste her time trying to make your pain sound noble." Nolan slipped the photo back into his coat. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky looked washed and hard. "Thank you," he said. "I did not do it for you. I know." He returned to the sedan and sat with both hands on the wheel. For a full minute he did not start the engine. Then he took out his phone and called Ava. His sister answered on the fourth ring. "Tell me you did not send men after her." "I called them off." A pause. "Say that again." "I called them off." Ava exhaled. "Good. That is the first intelligent thing you have done since puberty." "I am driving north. Alone." "Yes." "Do you know what you are going to say when you find her?" Nolan looked at the letters on the seat. "No." "Then keep driving until you do." He closed his eyes. "Ava." "She is not a lost watch, Nolan. You do not get to find her and put her back where she was." "I know. No, you do not. You are beginning to know." "That is not the same thing." His jaw tightened. "I love her." The words filled the car. Raw, late, useless. True. Ava was quiet for so long he thought the call had dropped. Then she said softer, "Then love her properly. That may mean letting her hate you from a distance." Nolan looked through the windshield at the road. "I do not know how. Learn fast." The line clicked dead. By mid-afternoon, Eddie's truck slowed. Lila felt it in the floor first. A change in vibration, a drag in the engine, tires rolling over rumble strips, then voices, muffled but close. Eddie speaking with someone outside. A man laughed. Another voice answered. "State Police." Lila's body went still. The truck moved a few feet and stopped again. The rear door handle clanked. Cold daylight cracked the dark. Lila pressed herself behind the pallet and pulled the blanket tighter. Her breath wanted to come fast. She forced it shallow. The door opened. A flashlight cut across boxes of shrimp and ice. "Smells like hell in here," a trooper said. Eddie's voice came back lazy and irritated. "That is shrimp. You want roses? Stop a florist. Move that pallet." Lila's heart slammed so hard she felt it in her teeth. Eddie swore under his breath. The pallet scraped forward. Light widened. Lila stared at the dark wall inches from her face. Do not move. Do not breathe. Do not exist. Boots stepped onto the truck floor. The flashlight passed over the blanket near her shoulder. For 1 second it stopped. Lila thought of Nolan at the breakfast table. She thought of Rose sweeping broken porcelain. She thought of her mother in a hospital bed already betrayed, still holding her daughter's hand. Hold! The trooper sniffed. Jesus. Something die back here, Eddie said. Several hundred shrimp, technically. The trooper coughed. You always this charming, only when armed men insult my cargo. A long pause. Then the trooper laughed. Get out of here. The door slammed. Darkness returned. The truck rolled forward. Lila did not breathe until the highway swallowed them again. When she finally did, her whole body shook so hard the ledger slipped from under her coat. She caught it before it hit the floor. By early evening, Eddie dropped her behind a warehouse on the edge of Memphis. He did not say goodbye. He only opened the truck, pointed toward the street, and said, Bus station is 5 blocks. Train station is 9. Trouble is everywhere. Pick your poison. Lila climbed down on unsteady legs. Thank you. Eddie looked at her over his sunglasses. Never saw you. No. Good. He shut the truck and drove away. Memphis smelled of river water, hot pavement, fried food, and rain waiting to happen. Lila walked with her bag close to her body until she reached the train station. Inside, people sat under bright lights with their luggage at their feet, and their lives still recognizable. She found a bench near the far wall. Her hands shook as she opened the burner phone. She dialed the number from memory. It rang 5 times. A man answered. Mercer. Lila closed her eyes. Mr. Mercer, this is Lila Hart. Silence, long enough for her to think she had made a mistake. Then the old man said Claire's girl. The sound of her mother's name nearly broke her. Yes. Where are you, Memphis? Are you alone for the moment? What do you have my father's ledger? On the other end of the line, something shifted. A chair, a breath, the weight of an old man standing up inside an old war. Listen to me carefully, Silas Mercer said. Do not go to a hotel. Do not get on a train. Sit where there are cameras and people. A blue pickup will arrive in 30 minutes. The driver will say your mother's real name. If he says anything else, walk away. Lila swallowed. Silas. Yes, child. My father killed my mother. The silence changed. It became older. Yes, Silas said softly. He did. Lila pressed her hand over her mouth. You knew. I did. And you never told me. Your mother made me promise. She said the truth would find you when you were ready to survive it. Lila looked across the station at a little girl sleeping against her mother's shoulder. I am ready. I know, Silas said. Stay where you are. The call ended. Lila sat on the bench with the phone in her lap. For the first time since leaving New Orleans, she was not entirely alone. 2 hours south, Nolan stood in a gas station near the Mississippi border with Lila's photo in his hand. The teenage clerk behind the register studied it too long. Nolan felt his heart move. You saw her. Maybe. When couple hours ago. Not her exactly. A coat, cream or light-colored, in the back of Eddie Boone's seafood truck. Nolan went still. Where does Boone deliver Memphis? Warehouse by the river. Sometimes he stops near the train station for coffee. Nolan placed $200 on the counter. The boy stared at it. I do not need change, Nolan said. He walked back to the sedan. The sun was low now, turning the wet road gold. He sat behind the wheel, took Lila's ring from his pocket, and held it in his open palm. I am coming, he whispered. Then he corrected himself. No. He closed his hand around the ring. I am asking. He started the car and drove toward Memphis, while far ahead Lila watched a blue pickup pull up outside the station doors. The blue pickup had rust along the doors and a cracked windshield that caught the station lights like a spiderweb. Lila stood behind the glass doors of the Memphis train station. One hand wrapped around the strap of her bag, the other closed around the burner phone. She watched the truck idle at the curb. The driver did not get out. He was a heavy-set black man in a gray cap, both hands on the wheel, his face turned toward the street as if he were waiting for no one in particular. People moved around her with coffee cups, suitcases, tired children, and ordinary complaints. A woman argued with her husband about tickets. A little boy dropped a bag of chips and started crying. A man in a work shirt slept with his chin against his chest. The world was full of people who had no idea a ledger capable of gutting half the South sat wrapped in a cardigan inside Lila's bag. The pickup flashed its lights once. Lila did not move. The driver lowered the passenger window and looked toward the station entrance. He said one word. Claire Mason, her mother's hidden name. Lila stepped outside. The evening air smelled like rain exhaust and the river. She crossed the sidewalk without running. Running made people look twice. She had learned that in less than 2 days. The driver unlocked the door and she climbed in with the bag on her lap. He pulled away from the curb before she buckled her seatbelt. Mr. Mercer sent you, she asked. He did. What is your name, Leon? Where are we going? To a hotel by the river. A hotel does not sound safe. Leon glanced at her. It is if Mr. Mercer owns the top floor, the elevator cameras, and the man at the front desk. Lila looked out the window. Memphis slid by in wet neon and old brick. Music drifted from somewhere on Beale Street, muffled by glass and distance. The city felt alive in a way New Orleans had not felt to her in months. It was not cleaner. It was not kinder. It was simply not Nolan's. That alone made it easier to breathe. The hotel stood near the river, old and narrow, with brass doors and a green awning darkened by rain. Leon drove into the alley instead of stopping at the front. A side door opened before the truck stopped. 2 men waited inside. Not young, not loud, not the kind of men who needed to show their guns to prove they had them. One took Lila's bag gently. She held on. His eyes met hers. Ma'am, I need to check it for a tracker. You keep the ledger in your hands if that makes you feel better. Lila did not ask how he knew. She unzipped the bag herself and removed the wrapped ledger, the photographs, and her father's letter. She pressed them against her chest. The man checked the lining, the seams, the handle, her coat, even the soles of her boots. He found nothing. Only then did Leon lead her inside. They took a service elevator to the top floor. When the doors opened, Silas Mercer stood in the hallway. He was older than she remembered. Smaller, too, though maybe that was because she had been a child the last time she saw him. His hair was white now, combed back from a sharp, tired face. He wore a dark suit without a tie, and he leaned on a cane with a silver wolf head. But his eyes were the same. Clear, watchful, sad. For a second, Lila was 9 years old again, standing under black umbrellas at her mother's funeral, while grown men told lies over fresh dirt. Silas did not reach for her. He waited. That almost broke her more than if he had. Lila, he said. Her name in his voice sounded like it had been kept safe somewhere. She walked toward him slowly. When she was close enough, he lifted one hand and touched her cheek with the back of his fingers. Not possessive, not claiming, just enough to prove she was real. You have Claire's eyes, he said. Lila swallowed hard. My father killed her. Silas closed his eyes once. Yes. The word did not surprise her. She already knew. But hearing someone else say it made the truth step fully into the room. Why, she asked. Silas turned and led her into the suite. It was large, quiet, and dimly lit. Heavy curtains covered the windows. A table had been cleared near the center of the room. Coffee sat in a silver pot. A plate of sandwiches waited untouched. 2 cell phones lay beside a legal pad, both turned off. Silas gestured for the men to leave. They did. The door closed. Only then did he answer. Your mother found out Raymond was selling roots to men who moved girls through the Gulf ports. Not drugs, not guns. Girls. Some were 16. Some younger. Claire threatened to take you and go to the bureau. Lila's knees weakened. She reached for the nearest chair and sat before she fell. Silas did not soften the rest. Raymond loved your mother. That was the most dangerous thing about him. Men like Raymond believe love means ownership. He could not bear to lose her, and he could not allow her to expose him. So he chose the empire and mourned her like a man who had been robbed. Lila stared at the ledger in her lap. Her father's handwriting crawled across the leather through the pages, invisible but present. He cried at her funeral. Yes. He held my hand. Yes. He told me God needed her. Silas's mouth trembled with disgust. God gets blamed for many things men do with money. Lila laughed once, a thin sound with no humor. Then she went silent. Silas waited. The city hummed below them. Somewhere outside, a siren rose and faded. Rain pressed softly against the windows like fingertips. Lila opened the ledger and turned to her mother's entry. She placed it on the table between them. Silas looked at it, but he did not touch it. How many people know what is in here? She asked. Alive. Yes, too many to let you live comfortably. Too few to stop pretending they are innocent. I need copies, already being arranged. She looked up sharply. Silas held her gaze. Do not mistake preparation for control, child. You called me because you needed someone who understood the game. I have men downstairs making digital scans. Nothing leaves this room without your permission. My permission? Lila repeated. The words felt strange. Silas nodded. Yours. She leaned back in the chair and looked around the room. No Nolan, no Raymond, no guards wearing the Cross family crest on their cufflinks. No one telling her to smile, rest, wait, behave, or be reasonable. What do I do with it? She asked. Silas lowered himself into the chair across from her. That depends on what you want. I want my mother back. The old man's face changed. Grief moved across it slowly. I know. I want my father to crawl out of his grave so I can ask him how he tucked me into bed with those hands. I know that too. I want Nolan Cross to hurt. Silas studied her carefully. That one is possible. Lila looked down at her bare ring finger. The skin still showed a pale circle where the diamond had been. I do not know if I want possible. Silas reached for the coffee and poured her a cup. You are allowed not to know tonight. I may not have tonight. You have this hour. She took the coffee. It was hot and bitter. Better than Hank's. Worse than Rose's. Ordinary enough to steady her. Is Nolan coming? She asked. Silas did not lie. Yes. Lila's fingers tightened around the cup. How do you know? My people saw his father's gray sedan outside Memphis. He is alone. Alone does not mean harmless. No. Did he bring men? Not that we can see. That means he has learned to hide them better. Silas smiled faintly. Possibly. Lila looked toward the covered windows. The rain made a soft private sound against the glass. He told me he never loved me, she said. Silas's expression did not change. Did you believe him? Yes. Do you still? She wanted to say yes again. It should have been easy. The word was right there. Instead, her mind betrayed her with memories. Nolan standing in the doorway of his mother's hospital room, pale and silent, while Lila took his hand because no one else dared. Nolan leaving a book on her pillow after she mentioned wanting to read it, then pretending he had not. Nolan pausing outside her bedroom door at night. Nolan watching her across crowded rooms with something buried so deep in his face she had mistaken it for contempt. "I do not know," she said. Silas nodded as if that answer cost more than the other one would have. Love and cruelty can live in the same man. That is why women get trapped trying to save the part that is real. Lila looked at him. "I am not trapped." "No," Silas said. "You are not." At that exact moment, Nolan Cross entered the lobby downstairs. He wore no overcoat, though rain had darkened the shoulders of his suit. His hair was damp. His face looked carved thin by 2 days without sleep. The man at the front desk looked up, saw him, and reached beneath the counter. Nolan lifted both hands, slowly. "I am here to see Lila Hart." The front desk clerk said nothing. 2 of Silas's men came from the lounge. One stood near Nolan's left side. The other moved behind him. Nolan did not turn. "No phone," he said. "No gun." "Arms out," one of the men ordered. Nolan obeyed. They searched him thoroughly. Pockets, ankles, jacket lining, belt, the inside of his shoes. They found the wedding ring and one folded piece of cream stationery. The man held up the ring. Nolan's voice went flat. "That stays with me unless she asks for it." The man looked at the second guard. Then he gave it back. The elevator ride felt longer than any ride Nolan had ever taken. He stared at his reflection in the brass doors. For years, men had seen him coming and moved aside. He had mistaken fear for respect so long that he had forgotten the difference. Now he stood unarmed in a hotel owned by an old enemy, waiting to face a woman he had broken with no power except words. Words had started this. He did not trust them to end it. The elevator opened. Leon stood in the hallway. "Walk slowly," Leon said. "Stop when she tells you." Nolan nodded. At the end of the hall, Silas Mercer stood outside the suite door. The 2 men looked at one another for the first time in years. Silas's mouth tightened. "Arthur's boy. Mr. Mercer, you look like him when you are trying not to be afraid." Nolan absorbed that. "I am afraid." Silas tilted his head slightly. "That is new." "Yes." Silas opened the door. Lila stood near the window. She had changed clothes, black pants, white blouse. Her hair pulled back from her face. Claire's silver cross lay at her throat. There was a pistol on the table near her right hand, but her hand was not on it. That was something. Not forgiveness. Something. Nolan stopped just inside the room. The door closed behind him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sight of her struck him harder than he expected. Not because she looked fragile. She did not. That was the part that cut. She looked tired, wounded, and unreachable. She looked like someone who had dragged herself through fear and come out carrying a blade. Lila broke the silence. "If you came for the ledger, you will not leave this room with it." Nolan reached slowly into his pocket. Silas's hand shifted toward his cane. Nolan placed the ring on the table. "I came to return this." Lila looked at it. Her expression did not move. "You can keep it," she said. "It always looked more like yours than mine." Nolan nodded once. The hit landed. He let it. "I also came to say I lied." Lila laughed softly. "That narrows nothing down." He took a breath. "At breakfast." Her eyes sharpened. "I know which breakfast. I lied when I said I never loved you." The room seemed to hold itself still. Lila looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "Do not." Nolan's chest tightened. "Lila. No. Do not stand there after I ran through rain and mud and cold trucks and men with flashlights and tell me the knife was imaginary. It was not imaginary." You put it in my chest. I know. You watched me bleed and told the housekeeper to clean the floor. His voice broke on the edge of the answer. I know. She stepped closer, but not enough for him to touch. You do not get to make the wound romantic because you regret holding the blade. Nolan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he looked at her fully. No, I do not. That answer did more damage to her anger than denial would have. She hated him a little for learning honesty late. Silas stood near the far wall, silent. Nolan continued slower now. I loved you by the 3rd month. Lila's jaw tightened. He did not stop. I knew it the night my mother died. Everyone in that church looked at me like they were waiting to see whether I would crack. You were the only person who did not look. You just took my hand. You held it through the burial. You did not ask for anything. You did not make my grief about yours. You just stayed. Lila's eyes shone, but she did not blink. I knew it when I came home late and found you asleep in the library with a book on your chest. I stood there for 10 minutes because the house was quiet and you made it feel less dead. I knew it when you stopped asking me to come to dinner because that meant I had taught you not to hope. His voice roughened. I knew it every time I walked away from your door. Lila looked down. The silver cross rose and fell with her breathing. Then why, she asked. 2 words. They were not loud. They were worse. Nolan looked at the covered windows. He could see his own reflection there ghosted over hers. Because my father raised me to believe love was the place men go to be killed. Because every soft thing in our house was punished until it learned to hide. Because I thought if I kept you far enough away, no one could use you against me. Then I realized I wanted you close, and that scared me worse. Lila's mouth trembled once. So you made me feel worthless. Yes. So you could feel safe. The truth stood between them, ugly and undeniable. Yes, Nolan said. Lila turned away. For a second, he thought she might cry. She did not. She walked to the table and opened the ledger. You want truth, she said. Nolan stayed where he was. Yes. She turned the book toward him. Arthur Cross. Payment confirmed. 3.2 million. Baton Rouge, November 2018. Nolan looked at the page. His father's name sat there in Raymond Hart's handwriting. He did not move for several seconds. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. I suspected. Lila looked up. You suspected my father killed yours. I suspected someone did. Arthur Cross did not die peacefully. Men like him rarely do. Did you know it was Raymond? No. Would you have married me if you had Nolan's eyes lifted to hers? Yes. The answer hit her strangely. You would have married the daughter of the man who killed your father. I married you because Raymond Hart had enemies. I married you because the Hart men would have torn the city apart without a symbol to kneel to. I married you because I told myself that was strategy. And the real reason, Nolan's face changed. The first time I saw you after the funeral, you were standing in your father's study with blood on your lip because you had bitten it, trying not to cry in front of his men. You looked terrified, but you did not lower your head. I thought if someone did not stand between you and them, they would eat you alive. Lila stared at him. You never told me that. I did not know how to say it without admitting I cared. The honesty was too late, but it was still honesty. Lila turned another page. Claire Hart. Payment arranged. 1.8 million. Galveston. July 2004. Nolan read it. His face went still in a different way. The silence that followed was not about crime. It was about a child losing the last clean room in her memory. My mother, Lila, said. He killed my mother too. Nolan looked up slowly. Whatever he had prepared to say died before it reached his mouth. Lila's voice remained calm, which made the words sound sharper. She knew about girls being moved through the ports. She wanted to take me and go to the bureau. My father chose his empire. Then he sat beside my bed and told me God had taken her. Nolan whispered her name. She lifted one hand. No, do not pity me. I am done being the girl men pity after they ruin her. Nolan stepped back as if the words had physical force. Silas's eyes stayed on him. Lila closed the ledger. I have copies being made. Nolan nodded. One goes to a federal prosecutor. One goes to a reporter in Washington. One stays with Silas. If I disappear, it all goes out. Good, Nolan said. She frowned. Good? Yes. You understand what this does to you? Yes. To your family? Yes. To your men? To the ones who deserve prison. To the ones who deserve graves, God can sort them. Lila studied his face, searching for calculation. She saw exhaustion, fear, grief, something like surrender. She did not trust it, not completely, but she recognized the cost of it. What do you want from me, Nolan? He looked at the ring on the table. I want to say I am sorry without asking you to make it easier for me. She waited. He looked back at her. I am sorry for breakfast. I am sorry for every dinner where you waited. I am sorry for every door I closed and every morning I made you feel invisible. I am sorry I turned our marriage into a room where you had to shrink to survive. I am sorry I loved you like a coward and hurt you like my father's son. Lila's face twisted, only for a second, enough to show him there was still blood under the armor. I would have loved you, she said. The words almost took him down. I know. No, you do not. I would have loved you through the darkness if you had let me see where it hurt. I would have sat with you in that ugly old house and held every broken piece you were ashamed of. I was young and stupid enough to believe love could teach a man gentleness. He swallowed, and now she looked at him for a long time. Now I am older. A sound left him, not quite breath, not quite pain. Lila moved to the table and picked up a folder Silas had prepared. She slid it toward Nolan. There is a way for you to live. Nolan did not touch it. What way you call off every man loyal to Cross? I did. You hand Mason enough power to keep the streets from turning into a bloodbath. He can hold them for a while. You take the ledger to the federal prosecutor with me, confirming you came willingly. Silas looked at her sharply but said nothing. Nolan's eyes did not leave her face. You testify, she said. Judges, police, port officials, Hale, everyone. That would end the Cross Syndicate. Yes, my father's name was already rotten. My men will call me a traitor. You were loyal to monsters. He nodded slowly. That is true. Lila's hand tightened around the folder. And after that, you disappear. Witness protection prison deal, whatever they give you. You do not look for me. You do not send men. You do not send money. You do not buy houses near mine or flowers from 1,000 miles away. You do not turn love into surveillance. Nolan looked down. The last line found him. Then he looked back up. And if I do all of that? Lila's voice softened, and that hurt most of all. Then somewhere in the world there will be one man named Nolan Cross who finally did not choose power first. His eyes filled. He did not hide it. Do you still love me? Silas shifted faintly as if the question angered him. Lila did not. She only looked at Nolan. Rain slid down the covered windows behind her. The city lights blurred through the curtains. The ring sat between them, catching a dull gold glow from the lamp. Yes, she said. Nolan closed his eyes. A tear slipped down his face. Lila continued. But I love the woman I became after leaving you more. The room went quiet. That was the end. Not the legal end. Not the public one. Not the one written in court papers or whispered through New Orleans dining rooms. The real one. Nolan opened his eyes. He looked at her like a man watching the last light leave a house he had burned himself. I understand. I hope you do. He reached into his pocket and took out his phone. Silas's guard stepped forward, but Silas lifted one hand to stop him. Nolan placed the phone on the table and dialed Mason on speaker. Mason answered immediately. Boss, stand everyone down. They are down. All of them. Ports, roads, airports, house crews. No one follows Lila Cross. Lila looked at him. Hart, she said. Nolan closed his eyes once. No one follows Lila Hart. A pause came through the speaker. Mason understood more in that pause than most men would in an hour. Yes, boss. Vincent Hale will move when he smells blood. He already has. Give him the east warehouses. Let him think I am distracted. Pull our people out before midnight. Boss, that is not a request. Yes. Nolan looked at Lila. His next words came slowly. And Mason. Yes. I am taking the Hart ledger to the United States Attorney. Silence. Long. Heavy. Then Mason said, That ends us. Yes. Another silence. Then Mason exhaled. Maybe we ended a long time ago. Nolan's mouth tightened. Keep the civilians out of it. Rose Walker leaves tonight. Sam Carter and his wife get moved. Hank Carter too, if he will go. Lila's eyes flashed. Nolan met them. I know you did not ask me to protect them. No, she said. I know protecting them does not earn me anything. No, I am doing it anyway. She looked away first. Mason said I will handle it. The call ended. Nolan set the phone down. Then he called Ava. She answered with a tired, wary voice. Tell me she is alive. Nolan looked at Lila. She is alive. Are you? Not the way I was. Ava said nothing. Nolan's voice shook. I choose her. The words hung in the room. Ava asked softly, Does that mean she is coming back? Nolan looked at the woman by the window. The one with his ring on the table, her mother's cross at her throat, and her father's empire in her hands. No, Ava breathed out. Then maybe you finally know what choosing her means. Nolan ended the call. For a moment, no one moved. Lila picked up the ring. Nolan's breath caught before he could stop it. She held it in her palm, feeling the cold weight. Then she set it back down. I cannot carry this tonight. I know. And I cannot carry you. I know that too. She nodded. Silas opened the door. Leon waited in the hallway. It was time to go. Nolan stepped aside before anyone asked him to. Lila picked up the ledger, the copies, the letter from her father, and the cross that already rested against her skin. She walked toward the door. When she passed Nolan, he did not reach for her. That was the first mercy he had ever given her without making a wound of it. At the threshold, she stopped. Nolan looked at her. He had never looked more human. I am sorry, he said. Lila's throat tightened. I know. He waited. She gave him the only truth she could afford. That does not make me yours. His face broke quietly. No, he said. It does not. She walked into the hallway. Leon moved with her. Silas followed behind his cane, striking the carpet in a slow, steady rhythm. The service elevator opened. Lila stepped inside. Just before the doors closed, she looked back. Nolan still stood in the doorway of the suite, alone, empty-handed, the ring behind him on the table, the empire ahead of him like a body already cooling. For 11 months, Lila had dreamed of him coming after her. Now he had, and she left anyway. The elevator doors slid shut. Downstairs, the hotel kitchen smelled of garlic steam and lemon cleaner. A cook looked up from a cutting board, saw Silas Mercer, and immediately looked back down. Leon led Lila through the rear exit into the alley where rain fell in silver lines under the security light. The blue pickup waited with the engine running. Lila paused beneath the awning. For the first time since she had stepped through the east gate, no one was chasing her. No black Escalade, no guard at her back, no husband reaching for her wrist. Only rain, only the river nearby, only the weight of truth in her arms and the road waiting beyond the alley. Silas stood beside her. "You ready, child?" Lila looked up at the wet sky. She thought of her mother's hand, Rose's whisper, Sam's tired eyes, Hank's bad coffee, Eddie's cold truck, Nolan's voice breaking around the words he should have said before she had to save herself. Then she stepped into the rain. "Yes," she said. This time, when the truck pulled away, Lila did not look back. 6 months later, the first indictment landed before dawn. It came quietly at first, a sealed filing in Washington. A courthouse clerk with sleepy eyes, a federal prosecutor standing in a windowless room with coffee gone cold in her hand, reading names that had lived too long behind locked doors and polished smiles. By sunrise, the quiet was over. News vans lined the courthouse steps in New Orleans. Reporters spoke over one another beneath a gray morning sky. Cameras flashed against the faces of men who were not used to being photographed without control. A judge from Baton Rouge held a coat over his head as marshals guided him into a black SUV. A police chief who had once shaken Nolan Cross's hand at charity dinners walked past microphones without speaking. A state senator resigned before lunch. A second one tried to blame his accountant and fainted in a hallway before the cameras even reached him. By noon, everyone had a name for it: the Hart Ledger. No one on television knew where it had come from. No one knew who first carried it out of the Cross estate through the rain wrapped in a cardigan and held against a woman's chest like a living thing. They only knew what it did. It opened the South like a wound. Ports were raided in Louisiana and Florida. Warehouses were sealed in Mississippi. Bank accounts froze before the men who owned them could move the money. Church charities, shipping companies, construction firms, bail bondsmen, judges, sheriffs, city councilmen, campaign donors, and men who had spent 20 years believing their sins were buried under paperwork, all woke to find federal agents at the door. In New Orleans, the Cross estate sat behind its black iron gates with no cars in the drive. The roses were still trimmed. The fountains still ran. The white columns still stood bright in the sun. But the house was empty. Rose Walker had left 3 nights before the first arrest. Mason Reed sent a car for her after midnight. He told her to pack 1 suitcase and not ask questions. Rose looked at him from the servants' hallway, her gray hair pinned beneath a scarf, her eyes steady. "Did she get out?" Rose asked. Mason did not pretend not to understand. "Yes." Rose closed her eyes. Only for a second. Then she picked up the suitcase she had already packed. In Savannah, under a softer sky, Rose opened a flower shop on a narrow street that smelled of salt and warm brick. She called it Claire's Garden. Every morning she placed white magnolias in the front window. Sometimes, when no customers came in, she stood behind the counter with her hands resting on the wood and listened to the silence. It was not the silence of the Cross estate. This one belonged to her. Sam Carter and his wife moved to a small house outside Chattanooga with a porch swing, 2 rocking chairs, and a dog his wife said they did not need until the dog fell asleep at her feet. Sam never drove a cab again. He fixed old radios in the garage and drank coffee before sunrise. Sometimes a black car passed too slowly on the road, and his hand would still pause over the screwdriver. His wife always noticed. "You thinking about her?" she would ask. Sam would look toward the porch. I am thinking she better still be breathing. His wife would nod and go back to shelling peas or reading the paper. Once an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was enough money to pay off the house and one small note written in a woman's careful hand. For Jenny. Sam sat at the kitchen table for a long time with the note in his palm. His wife did not ask to read it. She only put one hand on his shoulder and left it there. Hank Carter refused to leave his farm. Mason sent 2 men and a clean truck. Hank met them on the porch with his shotgun, wearing the same stained flannel and the expression of a man who had never enjoyed being helped. The younger man said, "Sir, we are here to move you somewhere safe." Hank spat into the dirt. "Safe from what people who may want to ask questions? I have been avoiding questions since 1986. Mr. Carter, this is serious." Hank lifted the shotgun a little. "So is my breakfast." The men left without him. 3 weeks later, Hank received a new roof, a repaired well, and a feed delivery paid for in cash. He did not ask who sent it. He told Dolly, the pig, that city people had strange ways of apologizing, then went back to fixing a fence that did not want to be fixed. Eddie Boone continued driving seafood between states. When agents questioned him about whether he had ever carried a fugitive woman hidden behind shrimp pallets, Eddie looked at them with deep insult. "Sir," he said, "I carry shrimp. Shrimp do not ask for rides. Women with trouble do not smell that bad." The agent stared at him. Eddie stared back. Nothing came of it. In Washington, Nolan Cross testified for 17 days. The courtroom was packed every morning before the doors opened. Reporters waited in the hallway with phones, recorders, and hungry faces. Men Nolan had once dined with watched him from defense tables, their suits expensive, their eyes murderous. He wore a plain navy suit the government gave him because his own clothes had been seized. No gold cufflinks, no watch, no ring. His hands rested on the table in front of him, bare and still. The prosecutor asked questions. Nolan answered. Names, routes, payments, judges, dock supervisors, safe houses, burial sites. Which officer took cash? Which charity washed money? Which senator knew? Which one pretended not to? He did not look away from the jury. He did not soften what he had done. He did not make himself smaller or better than the facts. He gave the government the Cross Syndicate one piece at a time until the thing his father built no longer looked like an empire. It looked like men, weak men, greedy men, frightened men, dead men who had taught their sons to mistake cruelty for strength. On the 12th day, a defense attorney asked him why he had chosen to cooperate. Nolan looked at the man for a long moment. Then he said, "Because someone I hurt asked me to save whatever was left of myself." The courtroom went quiet. The attorney smiled like he smelled blood. "Your wife, Nolan, did not correct him at first." The word wife still moved through him like a blade finding an old wound. Then he spoke. "Lila Hart. Not Cross. Hart." The prosecutor continued. The trial moved on. But every reporter wrote down the name. Lila did not read the articles, at least not at first. She had gone north after Memphis, farther than Nolan knew, farther than Raymond Hart's men would have expected, farther than the version of herself who once watched the East Gate from a bedroom window could have imagined. Portland, Maine did not feel like escape when she first arrived. It felt like the end of the world. Cold harbor, gray water, gulls screaming over fishing boats, brick buildings wet with fog, narrow streets that smelled of coffee salt and wood smoke, no live oaks, no magnolias, no iron gates, no men in dark suits standing at the edge of every room. She rented an apartment above a bakery from a woman named Margaret, who wore red glasses and asked only 3 questions. "Do you smoke? No. Do you have pets? No. Are you running from someone who will break my windows?" Lila stood very still. Margaret looked at her over the glasses. Long pause, she said. That means maybe. Lila answered carefully. Not anymore. Margaret studied her. Then she handed over the keys. Rent is due on the 1st. The radiator bangs at night. If you hear singing at 4 a.m, that is my baker, not a ghost. The apartment was small, a kitchen with chipped blue cabinets, a bed by the window, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub, a crooked shelf, a heater that clanked like someone trapped inside the wall. Lila slept the first night with a chair against the door. The second night, too. By the third, she moved the chair away and lay awake listening to rain. Not New Orleans rain, not mansion rain, not rain against windows that could not be opened. This rain smelled like sea and stone. She found work in an art restoration studio near the harbor. The owner, a widower named Thomas Bell, had hands stained with varnish and the patience of a priest. He did not ask why a woman with a Tulane art history degree and no references wanted to clean smoke damage from old portraits for modest pay. He gave her a cotton swab, a test panel, and a painting of a coastal church darkened by soot. Slow hands, he said. The painting has survived longer than your mood. Respect that. Lila almost smiled. She worked slowly. At first her hands shook. Then they steadied. Day by day she cleaned old varnish from forgotten faces. She repaired cracked canvas. She learned how damage could hide color without erasing it. She learned that restoration was not the same as pretending nothing had happened. The crack remained. The repair honored it. The eye could still see where the wound had been if it knew how to look. That comforted her more than any prayer. Some mornings she woke reaching for fear. She would open her eyes and forget where she was. Her body remembered before her mind did. It searched for the shape of the Cross estate, the guards, the cameras, Nolan's footsteps in the hall, her father's portrait in every shadow. Then the bakery downstairs would send warm bread into the air. A gull would scream outside. The radiator would bang. And Lila would remember. No guards, no gates, no Nolan, no Raymond. She would sit up in the middle of the bed because she could. That was the first luxury she learned to love. Nolan entered witness protection in late winter. The government gave him a new name, a small house in Arizona, and a job at a garage owned by a retired Marine named Cal, who did not care for questions or excuses. Cal was 70, built like a fence post and missing 2 fingers on his left hand. On Nolan's first day, Cal threw him a pair of coveralls and pointed toward a truck with the hood up. You know engines a little. You know how to listen. Nolan thought of Lila. I am learning. Cal grunted. Then start there. The town was dry, flat, and wide open. No bayous, no marble floors, no men waiting for his orders. The sky stretched so far it made Nolan feel exposed. At night he sat on the porch of the little government house and watched desert wind push dust across the road. He owned almost nothing. 2 shirts, 1 jacket, work boots, a government phone he rarely used, a coffee maker that burned everything, a mattress that hurt his back. In the closet on the top shelf sat a shoebox. Inside were Lila's letters, the note she left on the nightstand, and her wedding ring. He took them out only when he knew he would not lie to himself. Some nights he read 1 letter, never more. More felt like stealing. Sometimes he held the ring in his palm and remembered the first time he had slid it onto her finger. He had thought then that a ring meant safety, agreement, ownership dressed up as ceremony. Now he understood that a ring could be a cage if one hand closed too tightly around the other. He never contacted her, not when the trial ended, not when the first guilty verdict came back, not when the news called him a traitor, not when Ava found him through channels she refused to explain and sent him a postcard with no return address. The front showed a lighthouse. The back said only, "You are still an idiot, but less of one." He smiled when he read it. Then he placed it beside Lila's letters. 3 months after the verdicts, Lila received an envelope at the studio. No return address. Her new name written carefully across the front. She knew before she opened it. Her hands went cold anyway. Thomas looked up from the workbench. "You all right?" Lila stared at the envelope. Yes. It was not fully true, but it was true enough. She took it outside and walked to the harbor. The morning was pale and windy. Boats rocked against their lines. A fisherman shouted to another man on the dock. Somewhere a bell rang from a buoy moving with the tide. Lila sat on a bench and opened the envelope. Inside was her wedding ring and a note. 7 words. "You were right. I am sorry. N." She sat very still. The ring looked different in main light. Smaller somehow, less powerful. Just a diamond. Just metal. Just a beautiful thing that had once helped convince her she belonged in a life that was killing her slowly. She waited for rage. It did not come. She waited for grief. That came but gently. Not the kind that drags a woman to the floor. The kind that sits beside her and reminds her she survived the thing she is mourning. She thought of Nolan in the courtroom saying her name correctly. She had watched that part once. Only once. On a borrowed laptop in her apartment wrapped in a blanket while snow tapped the window. He looked thinner, older, human in a way he had never allowed himself to be inside the Cross estate. When the attorney called her his wife, Nolan had paused. Then he said, "Lila Hart." She had closed the laptop and cried for 5 minutes. Not because she wanted to go back, because some part of the girl who waited at dinner had finally been seen. Now, on the harbor bench, she held the ring between her thumb and finger. A gull cried overhead. The water moved dark and cold below the dock. Lila stood. She walked to the edge. For 1 second, she saw everything inside the diamond. The breakfast room, the broken cup, Rose's hands, the east gate, Sam's cab, Hank's kitchen, the cold truck, Silas's suite, Nolan standing in the hotel doorway, finally empty-handed. Lila kissed the ring once, not for the marriage, for the woman who had believed in it. Then she dropped it into the water. It vanished without a sound. She stayed there until the wind made her eyes water. Then she folded Nolan's note and placed it inside her coat pocket. Not as a promise. Not as a wound. As proof that an apology could arrive and still not be a chain. Spring came slowly to Maine. Snow turned to dirty slush. Slush gave way to wet streets. The bakery began selling lemon cakes on Sundays, and Lila bought one every week, though she lived alone and never finished it. She kept fresh flowers in a jar on the windowsill. Not magnolias. They did not grow easily there. Daffodils at first, then tulips, then whatever the market had that looked stubborn enough to live. At the studio, Thomas gave her a new project, an old portrait of a woman in a white dress. The canvas had been rescued from a house fire. Smoke had blackened the edges. Heat had cracked the paint across the woman's face. One hand was nearly lost beneath soot. The eyes were barely visible. "Think you can help her?" Thomas asked. Lila studied the painting. The woman in white stood beside a window in some forgotten room. One hand resting on the sill, her face turned toward light that had almost disappeared under damage. Lila touched the air above the canvas, not the paint. "She is still there," she said. Thomas nodded. "Then take your time." Lila worked on the portrait for weeks. Slowly, the smoke lifted. The white dress returned first, not pure white, but warm, layered real. Then the hand, then the curve of the mouth. The eyes came last. They were not soft eyes. They were steady. They belonged to a woman who had seen fire and remained in the frame. One morning, Lila stood alone in the studio before anyone else arrived. Rain tapped against the high windows. The harbor was hidden behind fog. The painting rested on the easel in front of her. She leaned close with a cotton swab and cleaned the last dark line from the woman's cheek. Color appeared beneath it. Not bright, not untouched. Alive. The bell above the studio door rang. Margaret from the bakery stepped in carrying a paper bag. "I brought lemon bread," she called. "Thomas said you forget breakfast when you are arguing with dead paintings." Lila smiled without looking away from the portrait. Margaret came closer and studied the canvas. "Well," she said. "Look at her." Lila lowered the swab. Margaret tilted her head. Was she ruined? Lila looked at the woman in the painting, at the cracks that still showed faintly beneath the careful repair, at the smoke marks she had softened but not erased, at the eyes that had survived. "No," Lila said. Margaret waited. Lila wiped her hands on a cloth. She was waiting for someone patient enough to find what was still there. Margaret smiled and set the lemon bread on the table. Outside, the fog began to lift from the harbor. Light entered the studio slowly. It touched the painting first, then the workbench, then Lila's hands. She opened the window. Cold sea air moved into the room. For a moment, Lila closed her eyes and let it fill her lungs all the way down. There was no estate behind her, no ledger in her arms, no ring on her hand, no man deciding whether she was worth loving. Only the sound of water, the smell of bread, the painting before her, and a life that belonged to no one else. Nolan Cross had once told her he had never loved her. By the time he learned the truth, Lila Hart had already become someone he could never keep.